Hello, and welcome back to Isaac's Reviews. We have reviewed a variety of things. We've reviewed cowboys, and Puritan adventurers, and bounty hunters, and thieves skulking through cities. Well, today we have another review. And this one I found pretty interesting. Today's review is Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars. Like many of you, I had never heard of this character up until recent years. I was familiar with Edgar Rice Burroughs because of Tarzan. I'm sure many of you watched the old Tarzan cartoon back in the day. Or if you're like my grandpa, you probably watched the Tarzan serials with Johnny Weissmuller. That was my first introduction to Edgar Rice Burroughs, was Tarzan. And if you've read the books, they're a little different from the cartoon. I enjoyed them. They're fun. I really do enjoy them. But we are not discussing Tarzan today. We're discussing John Carter of Mars. My first introduction to this character was the movie they made, 20 years ago now? With, I don't even remember the guy's name. But they made a movie, John Carter of Mars, and they wanted it to be really big. Apparently they expected it to be really big. And it was not. So that is the last I heard of John Carter of Mars until I found this in a thrift shop. I was going through, looking for my usual books that I like to read, and ran across it. This is actually the last book in the series, and it's actually a conglomeration of two books. It is a combo of John Carter and the Giant of Mars, and the Skeleton Men of Jupiter. So let's get into it. We start off with John Carter and the Giant of Mars. This is the last book of the series. John has been adventuring and discovering civilizations, and he has finally fallen in love with Dejah Thoris. John, in the midst of his adventuring, he takes on a demented scientist named Pugh-Mogul and his giant named Joog in this book. Joog, that's a fun name. Pugh-Mogul. I'm going to have to pick up some more of this series. The names are fun. So, John, in what I'm assuming is his typical manner of doing things, he runs headlong into action. He's stronger, he's faster than most of these people on Mars, or Jupiter for that matter, and he ends up fighting people with a sword. That seems to be his go-to weapon, is a sword. He fights some great apes. He fights Joog the Giant. Several minions of this character, known as Pugh-Mogul. We don't learn about immediately, but we'll learn about him later. He ends up getting captured. He rescues Dejah Thoris. And then there's a fight on Helium, which is one of the kingdoms on this particular planet of Mars here. He encounters giant rats and dead, mangled creatures. He fights Pugh-Mogul, again, who's described as this misshapen, synthetic man. The way they describe him makes me think of MODOK from Marvel Comics. I don't know, not the movie, whatever movie it was that he was in recently. But the descriptions from Marvel Comics. He's got an enlarged head. He's got like a weird looking eye. And he's described as the synthetic man. So he's actually a creation of this other character. I picture him looking a lot like MODOK. Kind of creepy looking. Right? Somewhere between like MODOK and Frankenstein. Or rather, Frankenstein's monster. Let's be correct about that. So, he's fighting. He's adventuring. He ends up getting captured. Mogul has captured his friend, Tars Tarkas. Then, John is captured. And we get a description of Joog the Giant. He's described to us as 130 feet tall. He's made of Martians, and white apes. So he is this misshapen, cobbled together monster that Pew Mogul has created. Anytime it describes Juke looking at things, he's looking at things with hate. He is just a violent, large monster that has been created by this nut job, Pew Mogul. So then Pew Mogul is doing his villain monologue with John present. It says that his eye pops out and he ignores it completely. His eye is just dangling and he just ignores it, continues monologuing, and then finally notices and pops it back into its eye socket. At this point, we discover that Pew Mogul has captured Dejah Thoris. John tries to attack Pew Mogul, and he's carried off by Juke the Giant. He just reaches through the window, grabs a hold of John, and hauls him out the window. John manages to escape the giant, and manages to escape with Dejah Thoris. Then there's a giant fight on Helium. There's armies attacking each other, and John ends up fighting Pew Mogul in the side of this ship thing. He ends up killing Pew Mogul. Well, not necessarily killing. Let me rephrase. He's fighting Pew Mogul. He decapitates him, and Pew Mogul is still babbling as his head rolls out the window of this giant structure that he's in. And then John kicks his body out the window to follow. So we're not actually sure if Pew Mogul is dead at this point, because apparently synthetic men have a hard time dying. But he defeats Pew Mogul. He stops the giant by talking into this headset that Pew Mogul had before. So John grabs the headset and tells the giant, hey, quit fighting people. I want you to wander off into the wilderness. And so Juke the giant wanders off into the wilderness. Then John and Dejah Thoris, I picture the moon comes up, they embrace, the end of the movie, right? It's very, very fun. I've never read any John Carter of Mars before, and this was a fantastic introduction. But it's not the end. So, this is 2 books in one. The second book is called The Skeleton Men of Jupiter. The story starts off with John in his home with Dejah Thoris, conceivably taking a nice vacation from the last adventure they were on, right? They're relaxing. He goes out for an evening walk in a palace. So we find out that John lives in a palace, apparently, with Dejah Thoris. Then all of a sudden, a palace guard comes to him and tells him, hey, come look at this thing. So John runs out. He's going to go look at this thing where he is kidnapped by... Dun, dun, dun! The Skeleton Men of Jupiter. They are described on page 93. I'm actually going to look them up and read this for you, because they're described as looking mighty weird. Let's see. I now saw that they were not skeletons, though they still closely resembled the naked bones of dead men. Parchment-like skin was stretched tightly over the bony structure of the skull. There seemed to be neither cartilage nor fat underlying it. What I had thought were hollow eye sockets were deep-set brown eyes showing no whites. The skin of the face merged with what should have been gums at the roots of the teeth, which were fully exposed in both jaws, precisely as are the teeth of a naked skull. The nose was but a gaping hole in the center of the face. There were no external ears, only the orifices, nor was there any hair upon any of the exposed parts of their bodies, nor upon their heads. So these skeleton men of Jupiter are quite creepy looking, at least to John. And John has just been kidnapped by them. So, he's being told, hey, we're taking you to Jupiter. Of course, they call it something else. During the voyage, John is expected to learn the language of the Morgurs, which are the dominant species on Jupiter. He's expected to learn this language in 18 days. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm pretty smart. I can't learn a language in 18 days, but John is expected to, so good luck. During this voyage, John is starved, sleep-deprived, mistreated, but he actually ends up hitting one of the guards. They're trying to, they're encouraging him to learn this language, and they go to punch him, and he blocks them and smacks one of them. And of course, John is much stronger than these guys, so the guard goes flying across the ship. This is important. It comes up later. So John hits one of these guards during this voyage. They arrive, and John is locked up for striking the guard. Doesn't matter that he was kidnapped and sleep deprived and forced to learn a language in 18 days. No. You're in trouble, John, because you hit the guard. Okay. Apparently there is an invasion of Mars planned. That's why John has been captured. They're trying to take him out of the equation so they can invade Mars. John and another prisoner end up escaping, stealing a ship, killing more guards along the way, and John is able to save Dejah Thoris, because in the meantime, she has also been captured. He was able to save Dejah Thoris, but is himself captured while his friends fly away in the ship that he jumped out of. So, he steals a ship. It has technology that allows it to become invisible. So he flies up in this invisible ship, leaps from the ship into this structure where they're keeping Dejah Thoris, fights some guys, grabs Dejah Thoris, jumps back to the ship, or rather, she loads onto the ship, gangplank or whatever, runs onto the ship, and John is himself captured. And they fly away in the ship, closing the door, becoming invisible again. And now John has been captured again. John does a lot of getting captured in these books. I don't know if that's just this one, or if that's just something that he does a lot, getting captured. So now, John has rescued Dejah Thoris. He's thrown in prison with a group of prisoners who are about to die. They are scheduled to die in the next exercise. Apparently, they have a class of cadets, and one of their final exercises for graduating military school is to kill prisoners in an arena, a la the Colosseum, like back in the day in Rome, right? So John is in jail with these prisoners, and they start practicing fighting as a unit, because John is a military man, and he's had some experience with fighting, so he starts training these guys, teaching them how to fight as a unit. They end up getting put into the arena. They fight the class, and they end up winning. They escape into the surrounding countryside. So they've fought this group of cadets. They've run through the city. They escape into the countryside and encounter carnivorous plants. Apparently the plants on Jupiter are carnivorous. That's one camping trip that I would not enjoy very much at all. But John and his crew discover this. They figure this out after they cut a branch off of a tree, thinking that they could eat it, and it screams. So, yeah, carnivorous plants. Creepy. So he sets up watches, right? They set up watches. They're living in the woods. They're trying to escape. Finally, as they're traveling, they encounter this invisible city. They encounter this. So John and his crew are walking along, bam, right into the invisible wall. Then they skirt the wall until they find an entrance and figure out that it is indeed an invisible city. They end up hiding there until a ship comes by with the Morgers in it. The Morgers discover that John is hiding in this invisible city, and he gets into another sword fight. So he ends up fighting these Morgers, and he wins. And the book ends with John saying he's going to go rescue Dejah Thoris. He's got a ship, he's got a sword, and he's ready to rumble. And he is on his way to rescue his princess, Dejah Thoris. This book was weird, to say the least. Thoroughly exciting. I was not expecting 2 books in one. I was not expecting that at all. I thought it was just called John Carter of Mars, but apparently it's a mixture of 2 books. I have read maybe 1 or 2 Tarzan stories. I've never read John Carter of Mars, but after reading this, I'm gonna have to pick up some more, because this is pure sci-fi madness. it is speculative and weird, and John wins because of the strength of his arm and the brains in his head, and he is just leaping around fighting goons on Jupiter and Mars. And this is very, very entertaining. This was written back in the 40s, right? This was written way back in the day. It's highly entertaining. It's utterly ridiculous. I love it. I love it completely. So, this gets a big recommend from me. John Carter of Mars. You can expect to find some more of this. I'm going to have to look some more of this up and get some. So, John Carter of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Give it a read. Okay. Thank y'all. Wait, can I get the clicker to work?